Professor John Brembs, who is a professor of neurogenetics at the Institute of Zoology in the Regensburg University, Germany. He is very passionate not only about studying brain, that is his field, but he's also passionate about publishing research, open data, etc. If you want to know more about his views, please follow him on his blog. He's always blogging about some of these issues. And in fact, he's so passionate about open data and open access, etc. When I asked him to join as an associate editor, he's declined and he said, we don't need any more journals. What we need is less number of journals. So that is how he's passionate about not starting new journals, okay? So over to you, Jean. Please, we are all waiting to hear your views, passionate views on this topic. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Ooh, there's a very strong echo. Now it's gone. Excellent. Thank you very much for having me. Let me begin by apologizing for not being able to speak to you in person, but only here online. I've been to India once, and I'm sure it would have been great to be there with you now and discuss things in a more relaxed manner. Either way, I'll try to do my best to try and show a little bit what little small efforts we have been trying to come up with, solutions to show what one could do to make data sharing easier and less of a chore and rather part of an infrastructure. And so to show you what it is that we've done, I'll share the screen. I hope you can all see the screen now. Please contact me via the chat or anything else if you have any trouble seeing anything that I'm trying to show. And let me begin by asking something that may be varying a little bit between countries and institutions, but in our fields, the life sciences, and in most the most research funding areas that I'm aware of, people are now, and the funding agencies are now asking recipients to provide, or applicants to provide, data management plans, right? So what are you going to do with the data? How are you going to make sure that it's long-term archived, accessible, that you're adhering to all the ethics and legal rights and all of these things? And so since the funding agencies have asked us to do these things, us researchers, we've had a lot more work to do, but not only when we apply for funding, but then also when we want to publish, when we want to comply with these funder mandates to make sure that everything is accessible. And essentially, we do all the work, and our institutions can keep pretending that it's still 1995 and they don't have to do anything in order to support us in this task. And so why do funders think they have to ask these things of us, the researchers? And essentially, this is an old, or this is the depiction of a very old study that is from 2011, but essentially not a whole lot has changed. What this graph is showing is that most of the data is still with us, the researchers. There are some data, this top of the pyramid is where you have publications with data, data collections, databases, and these sorts of things, where you have a fairly stable data repositories or data storage, but it's still a small part of the pyramid. And even those databases, I work in biology, and in biology we have about 1,300 different sequence databases, for genome sequences, proteome sequences, and these other omics, about 1,300. And this is one of them. What's then called the XPASI proteomics server. And what you see is a web archive screenshot from 1996 that you can see here. But they were saying, oh, we've been around since 1986, right? They would have been 10 years old, but they may not exist any longer because they have funding problems. And so this is something that was already a problem in the 1990s, but this is still a problem today. As you can see, funding for key data resources is in jeopardy and from 2016. And so you essentially, every other year, you get a notification that, oh, there's some funding problem. And one of the main databases that I use is now asking its users for donations to be able to make up for a lack in funding. And so the problem here is that even the most stable and reliable resources and infrastructures for data are very fickle and can go away from one day to the next. And what consequences does that have? It means that statistically, the availability of research data declines rapidly with article age. So the older an article gets, the more likely it is that the data that is deposited just disappears simply because there's no more funding to keep the data repository or the sequence database running. So this is not a big surprise, and this has been going on, as you can see, since the 1990s, and nobody seems to be inclined to do much about it. So the question for us then is, okay, how do we take care of the base of the pyramid? If nobody cares about the top, which is when people think that these kinds of fickle databases are good enough, then what can we do about the base of the pyramid? Because clearly we want to avoid writing data management plans. I mean, it's enough work to write a grant application, and it's enough work to do the experiments. And for every minute and hour we spend writing data management plans and that we spend managing our data by hand, if there is no infrastructure, of course, we cannot do experiments. So we want to maximize the time that we interact with our experiments and minimize the time that we have to do with all this other stuff that we don't really want to do, but have to do. So how can we do that? And we've been thinking about this in our lab for quite some time, and we don't have any money. So while I may be speaking to you from a so-called developed nation, the differences between the individual laboratories, of course, is dramatic. And we have a few thousand euros to spend per year, and most of that money goes to our direct experiments, to some travel, and to fly food, because we work with flies. And so there's not much money left to invent infrastructure. The institutions are not very much inclined to provide that infrastructure. And so we've tried a few mini projects on our own to try to solve this problem. The problem can be described a little bit as follows. So you design an experiment, and with this experimental design, you produce raw data. And of course, the metadata that goes with the raw data that explains what is it that comes in here. From this raw data, you do some quality control, where you kick out the things where your machine didn't work. For instance, the measurement was not correct, such that you have metadata and data that then get evaluated into graphs and statistics that eventually make it into a publication. And then it said, okay, when you have this publication, you have to put all these data that's from here, you have to put them in a database. And this, in many cases, the base of the pyramid is done by hand. And what we want to do is we want to get rid of this work. Because if we can automate it, all we have to do as a right data management plan is say, well, we have an automated infrastructure. And so we cut down on time, both in terms of the data handling and in terms of writing data management plans. So the first thing that we did to solve this, or what we tried to solve, was together with a commercial provider, Figshare. At the time when we did this, I don't think Figshare was bought by Digital Science yet. I'm not quite sure about the timing here. But we used R and an R Open Science plugin and a Figshare plugin and libraries for R to automatically deposit raw data and the evaluations of those raw data with Figshare. So the way we've done this is that we've programmed a pipeline that takes the metadata, takes the data, as well as the evaluations, so the graphs and the statistics, puts them in a database such that people can access those things, but we can also easily take the figures and stats from there to generate a publication. And as I said, we did this with R. And so the way this works is that you have certain libraries where you then log into Figshare automatically and then create or update an article. And so I'm not going to go into all of these rfigshare code. The code here is just to show that it's a few lines of code that you enter into the script that you're already using to generate your figures and your statistics. And whenever you do that, so whenever you deposit another set of data on your hard drive, right? So you collected your data. Let's say you need an N of 100 in 3 groups, so 33 or something, and a sample size of 33 in each group, and you have 3 groups. And you start to do this, you enter 3 experiments in each group, so 9 data files, and then you evaluate the data to see, okay, what happened when I did this today. And then automatically in the background, what the script will do is we will create an article where all the data is in, and all the evaluations that you see on your screen also get deposited. And you do this, the next day it's going to be 6, the day after that maybe you will have 10 in each group, and so on until you have your 33 that you need in each group. At which point you close this down and say, okay, now I have reached my target sample size, and I will either write an article, write a publication about it, a manuscript, or go on with the next experiment. And so we did this for quite some time, and felt that yes, this is working, but it's with a commercial provider, and we don't know, eventually maybe they are going to charge it, and this required also constant updating here with regard to the code. So we very rarely use these things now anymore, but it was a nice proof of principle that these things can work, that you don't have to you set this up once, and then you don't have to put a lot of effort into this anymore. Another thing that we did was to say, well, you know, publishers get so much money, they should be doing some work for us for that money. So why don't we just send the manuscript, the raw data, and our code, and then that's all you need to generate figures. So let's just give the publisher, and the F1000 Research was so kind to trial this with us. We gave them our manuscript, gave them indicated where the figures would go, gave them our code, gave them our raw data, and said, well, you look, do this for us. And what came out was something here, like in this paper. If you want to go to this paper, you can just look up either the DOI or the title. You can go to the site and look at these figures. And one of the figures that you can see is figure 3. And what you will notice in figure 3 is that when you click on it, it says loading, please wait. Because what it does here, it loads the data, then uses our code and displays it. What's the advantage of this? Well, you see, you get a general figure. It doesn't really mean what the figure, it doesn't really matter what the figures mean here. But what you can do is you can go here and choose a different way to display it. Of course, this doesn't really make much of a difference. You can see it like this. This is the Tukey plot, and this is a 10 to 19th percentile plot. This doesn't make much of a difference, but it shows that this is what you can do, and you can offer the reader any kind of different features on your data, which means that you don't have just one static representation of what your data look like, but in fact, you can offer the reader many different ways of looking into the data. In this case, only 2, but you can, as an author, you can pick as many as you want. Another thing that we did in this publication was that we opened up the data, because if the data is already there and the figures are being generated, and this is figure 4, if I remember correctly, then why not let other people contribute to the work? So in this case, what we did is we looked at common strains, genetic strains of flies in from different laboratories. And we subjected them to a fairly standard test. And to our shock, so to say, we discovered that they are not identical. So these strains should behave identically, but they do not. It leads too far. It's a biological problem, a practical biological problem that we have to solve. But we found this and wanted to alert the community that, hey, here is a problem. And if you want to know how big this problem is, maybe you can provide your strain of flies too. You could do the same experiment that we did and then upload the data to see how your strain compares to our strains that we tested. And so in green is our data. And then in red, blue, and black, that you can see here is the data from other labs that have contributed their own data in this own experiment. And you can see, for instance, that their experiments, if you look at this as a principal components analysis, if you look at this slice of the data, so you see PCA1, PCA2, PCA3, PCA2, so those are different slices through the data. And from this perspective, these uploaded data, and from this perspective too, these uploaded data are actually even more different than those that we thought were already much too different. And so one can see by everybody else or other people contributing to these kinds of data, one can essentially make an online survey of how big is this problem that we have identified. Is that actually this big as we thought, or is it even bigger, right? So this means that such a publication would be never finished in a way, because if someone would find this figure now and say, oh, this is really interesting, I need to check this out, do the experiment in their own lab, they can now, many years later, they can now still upload their data and see how their data compares to the already published data. Now, all of this turned out to be not to our liking for various reasons. For one, not every publisher likes to do that sort of thing, even though it was very convenient for us. So it didn't really lead to a change in publisher behavior, but that may be, most of you are working in libraries, may not be of much of a surprise to you. So what we're working on now, and if we had some more funding than we have, this would have been already published, but this is not published. What we're doing right now is still not published, and it's still not finished yet. I do a lot of the work on this together with colleagues in the library. So this is a very local collaboration between the library, our library here, and me, and some people in my lab. And so I will show you what it is that we're trying to do, and I'll give you a brief, in the end of this, I'll give you a brief demonstration of what we can do with this idea that we're following right now. And the idea here is that we want to have every single digital item that we're working on during a project. We want to make this available, and we want to make this so interlinked that if you find one item, you can find all the other items. And so what does such a project typically look like? We use markup languages for this. So essentially we use HTML that pretty much everybody knows. And we use XML, extensible markup language, and we use YAML, which is a very easy to read for the human eye markup language. And the experimental design sits in this YAML lab journal. You can call it a lab journal because it says, oh, these flies go in this group. This is a control group. Then other flies are going to the experimental group, and then we have a second control group, maybe these sorts of things. And then we write down which statistical tests need to be done, which bar graph should get what color, these sorts of things. We all put this into the YAML file like we would do in a paper lab journal, but it's machine readable. And so we can have an R script that reads our lab journal with all its comments. This fly didn't work properly, this fly when we did this fly, there was some fluke with a measuring device or something. We can put all of these comments there. And R is reading the statistical and the file lists, which file goes into which research, which experimental group, and these sorts of things. And then loads all the raw data. The raw data are written in XML with a metadata header, and then raw data in the bottom. And that raw data contains link to the software that we use to collect the data, the software that used to analyze the data, so this R software, and to the data model that explains what each tag, each XML tag in each raw data file means. So like I said in the beginning, maybe you have 100 flies or 99 flies in 3 different groups. And so you have 99 files here. And this YAML file organizes these 99 files in 3 different experimental groups, let's say, for example. Then when the user then loads the YAML file that he or she has written, then this script loads all the raw data and computes quality control sheets. So each experiment gets one HTML sheet with quality control data where you can check that the experiment was done correctly. So you evaluate certain low-level features that are important to you to be able to quantify the quality of your research. And then you can go back to the YAML file and say, okay, let's eliminate this file and eliminate this file and eliminate this file by just commenting out the line where they're referenced, which means that all the data you collected remain intact and accessible. All of this data, it's just that the final evaluation of the project, some of these files are not being considered for evaluation, which means you do not have the problem that of data that are being omitted, and people who are checking this don't notice it. It's very clear and explicit which data go into evaluation and which data do not. And if someone wants to check this afterwards, they can go and look at all the data that was omitted and see if this would change the results in any meaningful way, and want to discuss why some data were included and others were not. So that is the concept here. And out of this evaluation come HTML sheets with the statistics, such as this figure, with the appropriate statistics going with it, that can go into a publication. And the goal here is eventually, again, then with a publisher, most likely, to have a format where we write the publication online, drag and drop maybe this figure here from this document into our manuscript. And once this figure is in the manuscript, it will automatically, the manuscript, link back to this entire project, such that if someone reads, when it's published, if someone reads the paper and clicks on this figure, they have access to all of these files. And I will we'll demonstrate you how this is working right now. What then happens once you do this, right? So the user sits here on his or her computer, writes the YAML file, generates the raw data, and whenever they log in, this is how we've computed it. So they conclude one day, go home, log in on the next day. Then what happens is that the computer runs a small Python script that checks, okay, this project that you're running on right now, is this synchronized with the publication server in the library? If it is not, then it will be synchronized such that every single day when you start your next day, then your data, all of these files that I just explained, get synchronized to the publication server and become accessible to the public. And then this means that the software then is accessible and the data can be reused for publication. And the software for now that we use is published on GitHub, which means that we do not have, that's one thing that's still to do. We do not have DOIs for our software yet, because this is not, everything is not quite yet in a state where we can provide DOIs for it, simply because it's not fully ready yet. But I will show you where these links to the DOIs for everything would go eventually when we're done with this. So let's imagine, so this is now the last few minutes we'll go for the demonstration of how this works. Let's imagine you've just read one of our publications and you found this figure. It's just one arbitrary figure that I picked from one of the latest projects. So you see, those are all the data that our graduate student Andreas Eweiner collected for this project, and you see some statistics here, some statistics there, and then as a reader you double click on this, and then this would take you to this URL. So I should, let me see if I still have this in my, so I can go to the chat box, and I should have this still, I hope, in the, no, I do not have it here. So I will stop sharing my screen anyway and reshare my browser in a second. So I can share that URL with you. I hope everyone can see it. And if not, let me see it like this. Everyone, maybe now better. Okay. And now I will share my screen with a browser. So let me see, where is it? There it is. So I hope everyone can see the browser. And you can see now I'm here at this exact URL that I just posted. This is a project of our graduate student. You see this was posted last year in December. And for instance, what you can do, you can see here is the YAML file. So this is a Drosophila time series project evaluation sheet, like this big HTML file. And if you scroll down to this, you will find this figure that I posted. You find all kinds of evaluations there. But the one that was important for the publication, let's pretend this is this figure down here, this one here. Right, you can see this here. And so this is where the user would end up when they click on this figure in the publication, they would end up here. And what they can find here, is, for instance, is the YAML file that I was talking about. The YAML file, when you just click on it, it opens, but you see YAML cannot be read by a browser. So you go read source, view page source, and there you see the YAML file. I'm not sure how good it is. I can increase the size here. You can see the experiment is a torque meter experiment that has a certain ID. We can go into there as well. Then it has a test of different GAL4 lines. You have to be a fly guy to know what that means. This is Andreas Eweiner, as I said, our graduate student who doesn't have an ORCID ID yet. And then here you have all the different XML files, and you see the comments that he made there, and then he took out some of the files are not included in the evaluation, but if you want to do that, you can just run the evaluation with these things in there. And there's a second group and a third group, because these fourth group, those groups were pooled, and you see the color range, significance levels. You can go single group tests, 2 group tests, or 3 group tests, different, what kind of statistical tests you are going to do. So this is in the YAML file. And so we can go back and then make this a little bit smaller again. So we can see this. And so here you see the RRID and I open this in a new tab. So it's loading here in the background. So you can see this is a Drosophila induction-based torque compensator. So all the techniques that we're using get IDs. So it's very clear what kind of machine we used. And we also usually link to flybase entries. These flies don't have a flybase entry yet. That's why this is not going anywhere. So this is one of the databases that host information about the different fly strains that one can use. And then all the raw data are sitting here as well and are linked. So I can just click on one of these, open it in a new tab, and then I get to these single fly evaluation sheets, right? So this is the quality control sheet that I was talking about for one single experimental fly. And you can get, for instance, you can go to the XML file. Let's open this again in a new tab. The raw data file. Again, this is XML. You can do view page source if you want to read it in a more readable fashion. It takes some time. And we can increase the font here again. Let's see. No, we cannot increase the font for this one. Apparently, no, it is increasing. There you go. It just takes a while. And so again, in the XML, we have metadata. And here would be the URIs for, oops, okay, sorry, too big. Just takes the browser so long. So anyway, you can see the URIs for recording the data, analysis of the data, and for the data model, and this just isn't finished yet. So that's why this is still blank. This is not finished yet. And again, you have the experimenter name, fly name, and so each individual file contains all the information necessary then, and then all the raw data at the end. So make this smaller again. Then you have this quality control data that shows you the experimental design, still a little bit smaller. And where you can zoom into the raw data, you can plot the raw data, this is automatic. And you can zoom in and look at the data, what they looked like over the course of the experiment. Of course, if you're not a person familiar with the experiment, it doesn't mean anything to you. But of course, this is for people who know what all of this is about. And you can get all kinds of quality control data, what the data looked like to make sure that, okay, is this really an appropriate experiment that works just fine and that can stay inside of this larger evaluation. So I hope I've been able to show you all of these different things, and you get a lot of evaluations. You can see this here. So we can make sure that your statistics are really reliable. So readers, now I'll stop sharing my screen again. So readers are able to get to every single digital piece of information surrounding the experiment that we have. So they get the same kind of access to all the raw data and all the evaluations that we also have. All the code, all the data, all the evaluations, everything, and they can scrutinize everything that we do. And because this is automated, the user just has to set it up once and then doesn't have to worry about anything anymore. And only when they switch projects, they have to edit the Python script to get a new title, and then a new project is being generated that gets updated in the same automatic way. And once you write the paper, you don't have to worry about anything. You open the different sheets that are relevant for your paper, you drag and drop the data there, and your figures are done. And also the linking to the raw data is done. And so for writing, in terms of writing if this were an infrastructure, then all you would have to write in your data management plan, I'm using the infrastructure of my university that makes everything automatically accessible to everybody, and that takes care of long-term archiving. So I hope I've given you a little bit of insight what one can do if as a researcher, if you collaborate with your library, if you even without any money, it takes longer and it will be lying dormant for a while when you don't have time to work on it. But I hope I was able to show you that there is quite some potential for automating data deposition, archiving, and one can even do this in a way that is very user-friendly, such that the data become both machine readable and human readable in a way that is conducive to open science. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to discussing this topic with you and the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean, for that wonderful exploration of what you have done in collaboration, especially with the library, to demonstrate what can be done, even though it's one small project. You have demonstrated very ably how scientists and library, and of course, with the help of Python, I should say. Publication plus Python is the one behind this opening up the research data that you have, and also be able to see that. So if there are any questions, be brief and ask.
So thank you for the demonstration of your work. It's very impressive, the way that all of the information is linked. I was wondering if you could give us an estimate of how much additional effort it took to have that level of integration, so that people who are thinking about doing something like this could start to plan out what the workflow would look like. So obviously the work to do the experiments is your main focus. How much additional effort does it take to have that kind of an infrastructure? When does it start to pay off after some number of experiments?
Yes, that's a good question, right? It's the return on investment question. For us, this depends essentially on how long you intend to run this kind of experiment. And so since most of our experiments are time series experiments, that's why we call it Drosophila time series data model. These kinds of this setup, we expect this setup to run for quite a number of years, which means that initially there's a lot of effort in setting it up. But I can look back because I've been doing this kind of work, with digital data and then writing your own code to evaluate them since the mid-1990s. The kind of work required now with R, for instance, is so comparatively small compared to what we had to do in the 1990s to get the same kind of results, and easy that even beginner students can start to contribute to this, is that all the evaluations that you've seen were done by different people. So we use GitHub to collaborate, and we meet every 2 to 3 weeks, I think it was every 3 weeks. And then we see how much work we have put in and where we are and where we want to go. And we did this for about, let's say, 2 years, and we were 3 to 4 people contributing to the code. So whenever someone said, oh, I'd really like to see this kind of evaluation, that kind of evaluation, we said, well, okay, let's think about how to do this. And then we sit down and code it. And now I think for the last maybe year or two, we haven't done anything on it because all of the evaluations that we currently want to do are already in there. And so if you distribute it among the lab, it's essentially, it's hardly any extra work. It is some extra work, but it's not a lot because you iteratively go it over every week. When you do your, when we do lab meetings, you show your data and then you notice that maybe something in the graph doesn't look right, or you find some bug in the code, and then we write down, okay, there is something that needs to be done. We write an issue on GitHub, and then when we have our next sprint meeting that we have every 3 weeks, then we see who is done with their project. Then they may be able to pick up one of the issues that we identified at the last lab meeting, and then see when we fix it. So the additional burden over the kind of coding that you have to do anyway, just to visualize and evaluate your raw data, is not that much. But of course, it's always like that with automated systems, is that you first invest some time and effort, such that in the long run afterwards, you sort of try to recoup that effort by not having to do much on it for a longer period of time. And so essentially the answer to the question is that you always have to sort of see the extra work that you have to put in is only worth it when you run this for quite a long time. I would not say that this is very conducive for projects that are like a one-off thing where you have like one survey and then you analyze these things. They're probably not, but these experiments will be running for years, maybe even until I retire. These kinds of experiments, not these experiments in detail, but these kinds of time series experiments. And so for us, this is a long-term investment that has already paid off.
Thank you. Does it answer your question, Kevin? Okay. Thank you so much, Jean, for the benefit of audience. He mentioned about Python, and then of course he's kind of evangelizing, I would say, about R. So talking about R, there is a specific strong R community for open science. In fact, I was interviewing one of the persons behind this R, that is, maybe you know her, Mail Salmon. And in fact, her quote, I just end this with her quote, "My tool set will change your mindset about your data set." So that is how she is actually a life scientist she was basically a statistics PhD, but turned now into an R enthusiast. So she's so gung-ho about R and how it can propel open science. So thank you so much, Jean, for your time and efforts to help us demonstrate how collaboration between scientists and the library and of course the software community can help move this open science movement forward, and particularly research data management forward. Thank you. Now I would like to invite the anchor for this session, Dr. G. Mahesh. G. Mahesh, who is the Senior Principal Scientist at the Science Communication and Dissemination Directorate, CSIR New Delhi, to come over to the dais. I would also like to invite our panelists, Professor Swapna Banerjee, Department of Library Information Science, University of Kolkata, and Dr. Bishwanath Datta, Associate Professor, DRTC Indian Statistical Institute, Bangalore. These two are in person here, and our third panelist is Dr. Shantanu Ganguly, Chief Librarian, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. I think he's there online, so over to you now, Mahesh.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Shalini. So let me start off with a promise. The promise is that I will close the session at 1 p.m. come what may, because we are already about 20-25 minutes late into the session. So I thought I'll get a round of applause having said this, but yeah, thank you. Okay, this session, in fact, Dr. Bjorn has set the context very, very well. You know, he started off by saying, talking about the concerns about the infrastructure in research data management, but then he moved on to the Faculty of 1000 if I can call it the experiment, where you spoke about the visuals in a live instead of the two-dimensional way. You can access it in a dynamic manner. What I meant to say is that the way people want to see it, they can see the graphs and pictures. And of course, he finally spoke about the interlinking of the raw data, the lab journal, and so the kind of things that can be done if we have a robust RDM infrastructure in place. And the session before this, we heard Professor Mutkavi talking about concerns in about RDM data and RDM infrastructure, and also Dr. Pragya, she mentioned about the survey that was done in Indian Institute of Science, where again the concerns of infrastructure was highlighted. And yesterday also, Dr. Kempawi, he amazed us with his talk. We saw the kind of in astronomy, the kind of infrastructure for gathering data, processing data, and the explorations, the kind of explorations that can be done, and also about COVID. So on and off, we could see great infrastructure, and also we could see people talking about, we could hear people talking about problems with regard to the research data management infrastructure. So on this panel, we have 3 speakers, as you know. We have, on my left, we have Dr. Vishwanath Datta. He's an associate professor with the Documentation Research and Training Center at the Indian Institute of Science, Indian Statistical Institute, Bangalore. Then to my right is Professor Swapna Banerjee. She is professor at the Department of Library and Information Science and Director IQAC at the University of Calcutta. And online is Dr. Shantanu Ganguly, who is the Chief Librarian at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences at Delhi. So we have a speaker from the south, a speaker from the east, a speaker sitting in the north, and we are holding it here in the west. And another coincidence is that this is a Bengali panel being moderated by a Malayali. Well, just trying to enliven things up. It's a lame dad joke, as my daughter says, when you come up with some silly quip like this, but just to enliven the audience. I'll not take much longer. So we'll start with Professor Banerjee here. So, Madam, all I will do is, after you, Dr. Vishwanath, and then finally Shantanu. So you can just go on. I will only interrupt you when you reach your time. So you will have about 10 minutes, 7 minutes each, and then that will leave us with about 10 to 12 minutes for Q&A. Okay, so I'll alert you when you,
Thank you, Dr. Mahesh. A very good morning to all of you. First of all, I pay my thanks to the organizers, to the program coordinator, to the administrators of this university for giving me a chance to share my views on a very, very important topic which is being discussed nowadays. To start the program, and just in line with the Dr. Mahesh, as he told that this panel is composed of all Bengali people, I'll just quote from Rabindranath Tagore. The famous poet Rabindranath Tagore long ago said, in Bengali I'll say it first, Chitta jetha bhoy shurno, uchcho jetha shir, gyan jetha mukto. If you translate it in English, it becomes where the mind is without fear, where the head is held high, and where knowledge is free. So I want to stress on this fact that the poet, long time ago, through his poem, stressed on the idea that knowledge is free. And we have come to this part today that data should be free. So I owe my respect to the famous poet before starting my just my views. Now, here today I am. I'll share my views in two aspects, just my views, my experience. In fact, I'll say my experience as an administrator and as a teacher regarding data. I have recently took over the responsibility of the Director of Internal Quality Assurance Cell of our university. Our University of Calcutta, you know, it's 165 years old, one of the oldest university of Calcutta. And you can imagine the number of data, the innumerable data. From yesterday, I was hearing data regarding astronomy. Today, we heard data in biology. We heard data in Aadhaar. We heard data in the genomic sequence, all their experiences. Now, we have a lot of problems or a lot of, technical difficulties in handling data in an educational institution of 165 years old. And as an administrator, every day we have to come upon data regarding data of alumni, data of teachers, data of students, data of medals, data of VCs, data of awards, data of notable lectures, data of seminars, symposium, etc. And each section of our university is responding to these type of queries every day, every second. And we have 65 departments. You see the number of PhDs we are producing. So you can imagine the number of data we are encountering upon in our university. It is a really stupendous task, this one. And this, apart from this, the UGC, the All India Higher Education Council, and all these bodies are asking for data every day, every moment, every second. And this data, cannot keep just stagnant. These data are updated. We need updated data, we need refined data, we need filtered data every day to give to the authorities. And on this data, based on this data, this data has to be so pure, this data has to be so authentic, this data has to be so quality that based upon this data, the universities are now getting their rankings. The Shanghai ranking, the QS World ranking, the Times ranking, every ranking is based on data only. So from the point of administration, I would like to say that compiling the data, acquiring the data, compiling the data, refining the data, curating the data, and above all, exposing or putting the data on the website, and these are a very, very challenging task for us. And the way you project your data, the way you design your data, it gives a very much shape to your institute, to your universities. And I am sure that not only the universities, we have a lot of colleges in our country. And the colleges are also faced with these problems of uploading the data every day, every moment. So I think that this is a very, very important venture from the point of administration. And recently we had a system of digital locker also, that the ministry wants the mark sheets, the marks to be uploaded also. So you see the amount of data we have to come upon. So this is one part I would like to say from the point of administrator. Now, from the point of a teacher, because my experience of teaching in this profession, libraries and information profession, is more than 20 years, so I should go to that part also. I fear that UGC has not till now given any mandate or in any CBCS syllabus on how to design a syllabus in library and information science regarding data. When I looked up the syllabus of most of the universities, data mapping, data archiving, research data management, all these terms are being taught in the MTech syllabus or in the computer science field. Also in the field of library and information science, persons teaching the IT, persons heading for the computer sections, and those are very much proficient in IT, they teach a little bit or a part or a section of this research data management or anything. But most of the universities, I mean say 90% of universities don't have this in their syllabus, which should be there. Otherwise, how do we, that yesterday Madam, Shalini Madam, the question she said, how do we link the librarians and the researchers and the IT cells? How do we link them? There comes the question of how do we link them if we don't have it in our syllabus. So this is one of the important thing I would like to say. So I would like to point out some lacuna in the UGC, that is, it should be mandatory, made mandatory that every university, state university, central university, should have a data repository system. Otherwise, if there is no mandatory, Shodh Ganga, Shodh Sindhu, Shodh Shuddhi, we know all this. But if there is no mandate on establishing a data repository system, it will be very difficult for getting data of the universities, for getting data of the scholars, students, etc. So this is my point, that infrastructure of the universities, of the academic institutions should be built up, keeping in mind to pose a data repository system in every college or university. So time is short. I would end, I started with one quotation. I would like to end that, like water, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. So we can say data, data everywhere, not the way to use it. That way I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
Very good afternoon, everyone. And I think our moderator is very, tough. So I won't take much time, so I will try to finish it within the time. So I start with a kind of, failure, but I don't know whether we should term it as a failure, but I put myself in that position because I am also the, placement officer for the ISIBC, center. And, quite often we receive the RTIs. Under the RTIs, lot of queries regarding the placements. And those queries are just simple, like you tell me for the last 3 years, what was the, placement, success, and all kind of what is the median of the, salary, and kind of these kind of questions. And you know that every time what I face the problem, and that's happening for last several years, that every time I receive that kind of RTI, then our dean's office says that, hey, professor, you have to reply to that. And then I ask our students, which might be now already, passed out, like some couple of years back also, they passed out. And now I have to find out their phone number, and then I have to call, hey, can you give me that details, placement details? Because he was the representative for that particular, session. So this is the problem. This is the real problem, that where you need the data, because you never know when that query will come. Now I come to the main point of this, this session, that theme, that is infrastructure. So time is very short again. So I just want to say that when we talk about the infrastructure, that I looked at OCLC, there is like some EEC framework is there, like education, expertise, and data curation. And this is something very important, that, that when we talk about the infrastructure building, we should look at from the facility, from the resource, and also from as a related to that, the service. Because ultimately, whatever you are going to do it is just to provide the service. So when you talk about the service, so you first things that, as from the previous sessions also we heard about this, the cultural problem, right? Incentive problem, right? So the thing is that we have to first, one thing that is, I put it, this education at the first, that we should first build the kind of awareness, everybody should understand the value. And everybody means here, of course, the researchers, they are the main that who will provide the data. But then the other beneficiaries also should be aware within the organization, okay, and even in a bigger sense to the community, the need of it. The second thing very important from the education point of view is that we cannot expect the researchers, to work on every, bit and pieces like the previous, the keynote speaker also spoke about it, that researchers, they are enough busy with their own research work. Now, if you ask them to do some extra work for data curation, or you create your data and then you submit it, you create meta, these are not going to work so easily. It will take time, and at the same time, we have to find out the way how we can, they are probably very good in their respective research field. There is no doubt about it, but not necessary that we can, expect that they will be also very good in terms of when it comes to the data sharing, data storage, all these things. So what is very important that we have to build lot of resources in terms of educating the people. It includes how to write the data management plan, which also should have these enough details about that who are going to be, the main in charge, like who is going to, maintain the data, right? Who should be held responsible for it, whether this is the PIs or someone else. Beside that, we also have to have the policy, because this is very important, because as we heard from the previous sessions also, that even as a researcher, I also produce a lot of data. That unless we get the bounce from the, journals, like recently it happened with IJGAI publication and some other, workshops and the journals, that what happened, they forced us that either you share your data and the code that you have developed, otherwise we are not going to accept your paper. That made us to actually share the data, right? This is like a force, though it is a very, negative way it came, but I see the positivity in that, right? So we need to find out the different mandates. It's not that just the journals or conference mandates, but it's also important to look at the funding agencies' mandates, your organizational mandates. If nothing is there, we have to build. So it includes a lot of things, and here I'm just dropping many other, minute things, because there are many other minor things we need to discuss. But then I'm going to the next level, that is expertise. The expertise, this is also very important, as the previous keynote speaker very rightly, pointed, or even the previous session also it was mentioned, that we cannot leave the war, on the general. There should be a community. So here the thing is that, and it is not that just the library alone can do everything, because we know that, we need this, because data management, I believe it's more interdisciplinary. So we need the people from various, groups, various, disciplines together. We should build a team so that the management, that program, that actually sustain. Sustainability is a real problem. And the thing is that when we say expertise, it's not just about, like in the previous, the point I said, education, that you build some resources, but that is not sufficient. Beside that, you do, as the expertise, this is the second point where we should be prepared to help them on face-to-face, one-to-one facility we should provide, and that I think involves a lot of effort. Now going to the third one, again to be in very brief, the data curation, basically I term it as an IT infrastructural point of view. I see it as an IT infrastructure where you need to build the proper infrastructure, you need to provide the support to the researchers so that they feel to share their data. Because you say that you share your data, where they will deposit it, who will be tracking it. All these questions will come, and it is not that when we should, so the question is here, sorry, I put it in this way, that this data management should start from the beginning, the time you started data collecting, from there it should start, and probably one phase will stop by finally producing the final data set, because you know that raw data is equally important. So that's why every time that whenever we start our study, whenever we collect the data, since then it should start. Yeah. And that's where, so it's not just again the data, you need to also talk about the metadata, because that's the one that which will support the retrieval of the data, which needs to be again compliant with the FAIR principles and all, right? Now, then the main part comes, which I think is very important. I should mention that the software part, that where you should store. Now, there are many softwares, maybe many of you are here, or maybe all of you are aware of that. Like, the various softwares like say CCAN, now nowadays, right? Or Genodo, Genodo is there. But I propose there because I come with the knowledge graph, technology, semantic web technology background, because nowadays I do a lot of research in that knowledge graph area. So I propose there is another software I found, and it is very bad. I found that their papers are not well cited. That is called Dendro. That's a basically graph data platform. And I would say that the previous keynote speaker actually he touched upon the graph data, and he actually showed the value of the graph data, because the RDBM is, of course, this is very technical. I'm not getting into that, so it will take a much longer time. But that's what I would say that to think. Now, quickly, I will finish it with the giving the idea about the what is happening in India, because one of my PhD students actually is working, but due to COVID, it hampered. I mean, it's not having properly. So, however, whatever the data we collected in context of India, I cannot reveal the entire data, I mean, what happened, but I can tell you, whatever we found is most of the cases, I think, in India, I think we can say, if I'm not very wrong, and excuse me if I'm wrong, that I think we are not anywhere much nearer to this, that the data management that we are talking about. It mostly what happens that we got the result like we are using Koha for managing our data. So that's the result. Or say, for example, we are using INRIS for RDBM purposes. So these are some of the things I think somewhere there is a lack of, the communication, the proper, the way that step by step, how it should be implemented. So I think there is somewhere it is lack. So that's where I think the emphasis should be given. And thank you very much. I'm sorry for the, very short, and I had to.
I shall apologize later. Yeah, Shantanu. Shantanu?
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. First of all, you have to pardon me that I am all the way because of some precarious situation. I'm held up at my office, so I can't come down there. But I could see in the audience all my beloved friends and all. In fact, I am very pleased to see Professor Rajashekharan Pillai, because I worked with him during the ICDL 2010 when I was in Terry. So what I would like to mention, I think many of my previous speakers, they have already spoken on many things, but from my own experience, and right now I'm in All India Institute of Medical Sciences. See, when we are talking about research data management, there are two major aspects which are coming to our mind, and I have started working on it because I have started a library research division here. One of the thing is we need to understand what is the research funding organization, where the RFO basically there. So I will be, giving an examples of two of my institutions, like the current one, that is the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and the previous one, that is the Tata Energy Research Institute or TERI. Now, research funding organizations, where they are providing the funds to address some of the pertinent issues and challenges, or create an impact on some of the research work which takes place, which addressing the goals of sustainable development goals, which are defined in 2015. And especially like in the previous institution, I was working on different sustainable development goals, but today I work on SDG 3.0 on these areas. Whereas in the other aspect, if you look at, so it is the research performing organization. So like, for example, ICMR or DBT or DST or DSIR, they provide funds, or maybe here GIZ, ADB, World Bank, they provide a lot of fundings to the different organization institutions like AIMS, like in TERI, they are providing for conducting the research. The challenge comes when you have enormous amount of research that is coming out and giving birth to the different types of data, information, knowledge, and that is where your infrastructure comes into the picture. This is a very, very challenging area because it is not a very easy area to address. So if you want to bring out a kind of a triangular synergy between RDM, RFO, and RPO, I think we need to address, because Professor Datta already talked about the DMP, but one of the important, if I look at from a research data infrastructure point of view, is in fact, in my aims, I'm trying to resolve it in a way that why I'm trying to, store it. The first thing is that why I'm trying to do is what was the objective, what was the, rationale behind it, and whatever I'm storing. So what is that? I mean, are we classifying those data as per the requirement of the stakeholders? Because this is a very, very interesting issue. In fact, yesterday I did a session on RIMS, that is Research Intelligence Management System, where this particular thing came out. For what data, for whom? So that's a very important area we need to address. And another thing is that who are our stakeholders? So ultimately, you have made a repository, but at the end of the day, if those resources are not extensively used by the stakeholders and all, then what is the fun in storing them and putting them on an infrastructure? Like in AIMS, if I say that and we almost conduct more than 250 researchers on various medical sciences, and like in the first session, the professor from IISc Bangalore was saying currently there is no fixed format or a structure of a data. It could be your numericals, it could be textual, it could be visuals. Like for example, we have a huge series of, I'm working on it. There is a COVID data, the different kinds of, from the initial stage when the coronavirus is affecting on the, different lobes of the lungs, how that particular picturization was taken, and it has come into when it was completely, destroyed and created a fibrosis into it. So how it has gone into that area. So that entire journey on a visual database was created. And we are working on it. So there are different formats are available. There are different, technologies. There are different software, different platforms is there which are available for these purposes. But one of the important things, which is like, for example, in 2021, I have launched the database of COVID-19 because AIMS was one of the main framework for the, the policy making of the COVID-19. So I developed the entire database on COVID-19 of the research output of COVID-19. But from the initial stage, there was a very big challenge that what I am going to take. And one of the things when I started taking the data, one of the biggest problem I came across, and I want to put forward here is, forget about your infrastructure, technology, everything would be provided. It is the data standardization. It was not there. So that was a big challenge for me to look into it. That is number one. Number two was on data interoperability, because you have the similar kind of a data from different data sources, but how one data talks with another data. See, I am not a very data expert, but when I started working on it and being a library information science professional for so many years, but I've handled several projects and all, it was little easy. But for current, the postgraduates who are coming out or from the, from the institutions or higher educations on these areas, not only in the library field, but even in the computer science also, it's $1 million question. How do they address these issues and all? So these are some of the things I thought that why not to share with all of you. Thank you very much for this.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shantanu. So now we are open for Q&A, 10 minutes. Yeah. Anyone? Okay, as you think up questions, maybe I will pose one question and all three of you can take a shot at it. So, largely we have the LIS community here, and many of them, they have undergone the tutorial yesterday. And as we know, in India at least, in the libraries, not much is being done about creating research data repositories. And we do have some learnings from institutional repositories, these successes and the failures and sustainability issues, and 20 years down the line, we don't have that many to talk of. When you say that you're publishing something like 150,000 papers in a year, how many of those papers are there as preprint in repositories? So we have some learnings to take from there. Now the question is that within the boundaries of libraries, what should the librarians or the library professionals, or to take it more specific, the new library professionals, what are the steps that they need to take to set up, the important steps that they need to take to set up a research data repository? Maybe you can mention 2 steps you can mention, and then Shantanu can maybe take a shot at it. Yeah.
First is, thank you for the good question. First, I think the librarians need the ways to acquire the data, the sources. First, they need to acquire the data properly. That means you need to get whether the data is authentic or not. That is a very reliability of data, as we say. And in this information explosion era, the authenticity should be judged first. The acquiring the data and filtering, searching for its reliability, its source is the most important task of librarian. I find the first thing before putting it in any repository or anything. And whether the data is appropriate or meant for, just now Dr. Ganguly said, for whom? The organization in which he is acting, whether the data, what he has acquired, will be effective for the stakeholders. That is very important for me, I think.
Yeah, 2 points there. You can make it.
So for me, it's like start with very simple thing. We don't have to think much. I think we have enough, expertise. And so what we need to do, the first thing is that we should have the right will, and we should have the understanding that what we are already doing. In a sense, just I give an example and then I stop. That is like, say for example, now creating institutional repository, as Dr. Mohesh started with that. So I think that's a wonderful, point that to mention that we already know a lot. The problem is that we get confused with so many new terms and new things, and as we heard, we get the, things, as we hear, we get confused. So for me, the idea would be, think simple that how to collect the data, how to convince people, and then start creating the metadata. Then you go step by step. Don't try to reach, it's my personal opinion, we don't have to jump. We just collect the data, create the metadata, and try to reuse your existing infrastructure. That would be, I think, a good beginning.
Yeah, Dr. Shantanu.
Once again, see, as far as my experience is concerned, I will say that this entire thing will depend upon on 4 aspects, and I would rather say it is 4 verticals actually. The first one is the people. I'm using a very common words, is the people. People means who are the stakeholders or the user needs we need to identify. Then second is obviously the incentivization. It could be tangible, it could be intangible. We need to work out on those areas. As Dr. Arora mentioned in the initial meeting, responsibilities, ownership is a very important thing. 4 is the collaborative model. What would be the collaboration? What would be the collaborative structurization would be there. And the 5th one is the training and education. So this comes under people. So I'm giving you the pointers. So now number 2 comes your technology. So when we talk about the technology, so automatically one of the major areas is RDI, which is basically called as research data infrastructure. So we need to look at it, the voluminous, talking about the velocity, the veracity, and all of those data and all. Another component is your structure. So under the structure, what is most important is basically what are the policy and guidelines and frameworks should be developed for that. What are the support services would be required on that? What are the legal aspects on do we need some of the legalities of that, because a lot of IPR related components are there. Organizational structure need to be framed out, and the library has to play a very important. And the last vertical, that is on task. So when I look at the task from an organizational point of view, 2 major aspects are there. One, what is the strategy towards it? And another is the finance. So these are the four verticals to me. As an organizational perspective, it is extremely important for having or maybe initiating a model in an institutions of higher education.
Thank you, Dr. Shantanu. Yeah, anyone? Thought of any questions? Yes, yeah, please. Somebody?
Yeah. Dr. Shantanu Ganguly mentioned about IPR related issue for data. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think data comes under IPR because data is not copyrightable.
Madam, you had a question? You can take the mic.
Thank you very much for such a nice, lively discussion. I can understand the pain of Dr. Swapna Banerjee, as she is a IQSC coordinator and she has to deal with all faculty members for getting the data for the NAC accreditation. I feel here that NAC only develop one research data management, maybe kind of software, and give every university in India as well as to the colleges, so that right from day one, all faculty members can put their data and it can be linked and it can be, the reports can be generated accordingly. So the problem of getting data and getting reports and uploading the data on NAC will get solved. So those who are the policy makers who are sitting here on the dais, so please convey this message so that this a big problem of this NAC accreditation and getting data will get solved. Thank you.
Do you want to respond?
Thank you, madam. Yeah, we are into it. But
And I-
getting the data from the faculty members or from the administrators and checking whether these are authentic is one of the prime issues. Then uploading is the second step, but the filtering and checking is very, very important. Thank you for your input.
Professor Pillai has a question.
Yes, of course.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you very much, for all the panelists for the very informative discussion. I have one point, because this conference is conducted mainly by library professionals, informatics, and most of the library professionals are there. What is the state of the library and information science curriculum? How much of this, what all these things we have, these are all probably new to many of us. But how much is these things are integrated, incorporated in the present day library and information science curriculum? It is not just for the panelists, this question. I would like to know it, because we are establishing new universities, several new universities are coming. Library, structural libraries are getting transformed into some sort of other incarnations. All these things are, discussed and happening. But how current is the library and information science curriculum with respect to the research data management? That's a question open to anybody.
Sir, before I ask for any volunteer to respond to you, there is something, I'm not sure how long you were in the discussion that we had. So we have two faculty members on the panel, the Professor Banerjee from the University of Calcutta and Dr. Vishwanath from the RDM Bangalore. So both of them did concede that as of now, with respect to research data management, there is a lot of scope for enhancement in the LIS curriculum. In fact, it was mentioned that a lot of these things are discussed in the computer science syllabus as compared to the library syllabus. This is something that came out from the panelist here. But I think this is, of course, I'm not in academics, but from hearsay, the the new education policy 2020, there is a lot of room, and many institutions, informal discussions that I had, for improvements, and many institutions in the country are looking at it. So this is my brief response. Anyone wishes to more study? Yeah, Partho. So Parthasarathi Mukhopadhyay, he is a professor and head of the department at the University of Kalyani. So he has some views.
Yeah, thanks for this very interesting question, sir. And I can share my experience with all of you here. We started a DS6 course, that is discipline-specific elective course as per LOCF, recent guideline of UGC. The course name is Data Carpentry for Libraries. And what does it include? It actually is based on three principal things: that what are the sources of data, as ma'am said rightly, that do we know that without paid subscription, there are a lot of data sources like Crossref where we can get bibliographic data. Then how can we convert that bibliographic data or we can enhance that data through data fetching technology by using different open source data wrangling software like OpenDefine and so on. Then how can we extract data from that software to generate information? And that programming language is called GRAIL. Previously it was called Google Refine Expression Language. Now it is called Generic Refine Expression Language, just like a function of Excel kind of thing. But the most important thing for a librarian is the data description. So when we are describing a textual object like journal paper, or whenever we are describing a data set related to that journal paper, metadata differs a lot. For that data set, we need to use domain-specific metadata like data site. Their generic Dublin core is not going to help us. So that we also teach that how in a general data repository software like Zenedo.org, which is actually based on the basis of name of a librarian, the first metadata librarian Zenedo TAS. So Zenedo name came from there. CERN has developed that. So we also teach students that how to install and configure that software, how can you use data site as a metadata, how can you open it up. So these are the things we have started newly.
Yeah, Doctor.
So I have that thing that Dataverse is also another software which is being used by the different universities, and that is open source software, and that can be included in our curricula. And also that data stewardship, that is also missing, and our librarians can come forward to introduce data stewardship in the research institutions and also in the research universities, which are being promoted through NEP 2020. So that is my point.
Yeah, thank you. I think.
Sir, this is regarding this curriculum development about the library and information science. Somaya Vidyavihar University Department of Library and Information Science. We are launching from this academic year for the Master of Library Science. It's a 2 years integrated program where, keeping in mind the guidelines of the new educational policy, we have developed the syllabus. The board of studies, there are 3 members are here, respected Shalini Madam, Dr. Medha Joshi, Dr. Manju Naika, and many. That is our Dr. Jagdish Arora sir also is in the member of the work committee. So now what I wanted to bring here, our curriculum we are having with a high school concept. And we had earlier brainstorming session with all these national and international academicians, and we have collected the views from them, how we can able to launch this high school concept with the Indian context. And accordingly, our curriculum says about that 60% portion is IT based. And then we are having this 40% curriculum. It is also from the library science. One more thing I just wanted to have, as per the new educational policy, this exit and entry level points also we have, which has been approved by our board of studies in the university. For in case of we are having the 4-year semester program, where we can also admit students up to the 2nd semester, 3rd semester, also in the 4th semester. In the 2nd semester, we can admit, this is the program after graduation, we can admit the student after second semester, those who are having the certificate course. Generally in Maharashtra, we have some certificate course, Government of Maharashtra and other organizations, that are 3 to 6 months. And those who are worked in the big libraries, university libraries, or the affiliated colleges for the 5 years experience of in working in the library. This is the one. Also, we can give the admission for the third semester. Those who are completed Bachelor of Library and Information Science, they can get the admission. Also, we can give the admission for the fourth semester. Because in the university system, there are certain students, after getting the admission for the Master of Library Science, they are unable to get some cases they have to submit the dissertation, then have to appear for the examination. Like that. So we can.
So what you're saying is that aligning to the ADP.
Yeah. And one more thing just I wanted to bring to your notice here, that also we have the certification. After the first semester, we can give them the certificate in the Library and Information Science, Diploma in Library and Information Science. After 2 semesters, we can give the Bachelor of Library and Information Science. After 3 semesters, we can give the PG Diploma in the Library and Information Science. And after 4th semester, they can get the Master of Library and Information Science. These are the things we have, and this each has been already implemented. Now, one more thing just wanted to add, we are having also elective papers. We don't want to have the only librarians to become the college librarians or the academic librarians. Our product also can become the web page designer, data analysis, even archaeologists or whomsoever they want to make the career in the corporate sector, they can bring it. These are the curriculum we have developed, and I'm thankful to these members of the Board of Studies and then Library Advisory Committee and those who are guided to us for the, given their inputs for the development of the curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I think we will close the session now. It's 1:10.
Dr. Mahesh, can I add just one point into it?
Shantanu, I just said no to someone in the hall, so if I extend that privilege to you, it will be injustice to the person here. I'm so sorry.
Not an issue. Not an issue.
So, so I'm not going to sum up the long session for want of time. But then, what I can, tell you is that maybe about 20 minutes has been shaved off from this session, but then that's not going to make an impact, not because the topic is not important, but because this is something that is going to come up. It came up yesterday, it came up in the previous session, and it will come up again in the other sessions. So, so that really does not matter, but I think it was a very valuable insights were brought before us, and very good interactions from all of you, and most importantly, finally, Professor Pillai stepping in and asking a question which is a food for thought for all of us here, to look at our curriculum closely and have these topics in the curriculum so that we can, help building research data management infrastructure, robust, sustainable research data management infrastructure in the country. So that will be all. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, all speakers. Thank you, Dr. Mahesh, for nicely anchoring. Today I realized the word, why it is called as anchor. Thank you so much. On behalf of conclave organizers, I request Dr. Mahesh to felicitate our panelist, Professor Swapna Banerjee. Now I request Dr. Mahesh to felicitate Dr. Bishwanath Datta. Thank you so much, Ishrat. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.